Taran had never been late before, not once in 3 years. But that morning, the subway had stalled for 40 minutes in a tunnel, and when she finally burst through the glass doors of Meridian Capital at 9:47 a.m., her heart was hammering against her ribs like it knew something she didn't. The reception area went silent. Margaret from HR was standing near the elevators with 2 security guards. Taran's manager, Derek Chen, stood with his arms crossed, his face set in that particular expression of professional disappointment she'd seen him use on others but never on her. She was the reliable one, the one who stayed late, caught other people's mistakes, never complained. "Miss Harper," Derek's voice carried across the marble lobby. "My office, now." Taran's hands trembled as she clutched her bag. She wanted to explain, to apologize, but the cold formality in his voice made the words stick in her throat. She followed him past the rows of glass-walled offices where her coworkers suddenly became very interested in their computer screens. No one met her eyes. Sarah, who she'd covered for just last week, actually turned away. Derek's office overlooked Madison Avenue. He didn't sit down. Neither did Margaret, who closed the door behind them with a soft click that felt like a trap springing shut. "I'm sorry I'm late," Taran started. "The train, this isn't about being late." Derek cut her off, though the timing is, let's say, unfortunate. Margaret slid a folder across the desk. Taran didn't touch it. "What is this?" "We're restructuring," Derek said. "Your position is being eliminated." The words didn't make sense at first. Taran had just closed the Hartwell account, bringing in $3.2 million. She'd been employee of the quarter twice. She looked at Margaret, searching for some hint of humanity, but the woman's expression was carved from stone. "Restructuring," Taran heard her voice come out smaller than she intended. "My position. The decision is final. You have until end of day to clear your desk." Derek was already turning toward his computer, dismissing her like she was nothing. Like 3 years meant nothing. Something hot and sharp lodged in Taran's chest. "This is retaliation." Derek's jaw tightened. "Excuse me. I reported the compliance issue, the falsified client signatures. That's what this is really about." Margaret stepped forward. "Miss Harper, I'd be very careful about making accusations. It's not an accusation if it's true." Taran's voice steadied. She was terrified, but she was also tired of being treated like she didn't matter. "Emails, time-stamped records." Derek's expression went cold. "Security will escort you out, effective immediately." The security guards were already moving toward her when the office door opened. Everyone froze. Taran had never seen the man before, but she felt his presence like a change in air pressure. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair swept back from a face that was all hard angles and controlled power. His suit probably cost more than she made in. But it wasn't the expensive clothes or the way he moved that made the room go silent. It was something else. Something in his eyes, dark and assessing, that suggested he saw everything and forgot nothing. 2 men flanked him, both built like they knew exactly how to hurt someone efficiently. But it was the man in the center who held Taran's attention. There was something about the set of his shoulders, the way he looked at Derek like he was categorizing him into a file-marked Melnikov. Derek's voice had changed completely. The smug superiority was gone, replaced by something that sounded uncomfortably like fear. "We weren't expecting you until... obviously." The man's voice was deep, touched with an accent that made each word sound deliberate. Russian, Taran thought. His gaze swept the room and landed on her. For a moment, their eyes met, and Taran felt something shift in her chest, something she couldn't name. He looked at her like he was reading a book written in a language only he understood. Then his attention returned to Derek. "You're firing her." It wasn't a question. Derek cleared his throat. "A routine personnel matter, sir. Nothing that requires." "I asked you to clean house," Igor Melnikov said quietly. "Not to eliminate the only person in this office with a functioning moral compass." The silence that followed was so complete Taran could hear her own heartbeat. "Margaret." "Melnikov, if I may explain." "You may not." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Miss Harper reported a compliance violation 3 weeks ago. Instead of investigating, you've been systematically creating a paper trail to justify her termination. I've seen the documentation, all of it." Taran's mind was racing. She'd sent that report to corporate compliance, never expecting anyone to actually read it, much less care. Igor turned to her. There was a scar, faint but visible, cutting through his left eyebrow. His eyes were so dark they were almost black, and they were looking at her with an intensity that made her want to step back and step forward at the same time. "Miss Harper," he extended his hand. "Igor Melnikov, I own this company." Taran shook his hand automatically. His grip was firm, warm, and over far too quickly. I didn't know. Few people do. I prefer it that way. Glanced at Derek, and Taran saw her manager actually flinch. Mr. Chen, you're terminated, effective immediately. Margaret, you'll be hearing from our legal department. Security, please escort them both out. The room erupted in protest, but Igor simply turned and walked out, leaving chaos in his wake. One of his men, the broader one with a shaved head, gestured for Taran to follow. She did, because she couldn't think of anything else to do. The elevator. Igor stood with his hands in his pockets, looking straight ahead. Taran could see their reflection in the polished steel doors. She looked completely out of place next to him, in her sensible work dress and scuffed heels, her natural curls fighting the humidity and winning. The doors opened directly into an office that looked more like a penthouse apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city. The furniture was minimal but clearly expensive, all clean lines and dark leather. Igor moved to the bar and poured 2 drinks without asking if she wanted one. He handed her a glass of amber liquid. Whiskey, she realized. She didn't usually drink, especially not at 10 in the morning, but her hands needed something to hold. You're wondering why I intervened, he said. Taran took a small sip. The whiskey burned going down. The thought crossed my mind. A hint of something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. I don't like thieves. Chen has been skimming from client accounts for 18 months. Small amounts, carefully hidden. Your report gave me the opening I needed to move against him without tipping off his associates. Associates? Igor sat on the edge of his desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. This company is a legitimate business, Miss Harper. But it also serves other purposes, cleaning money, moving assets, creating paper trails that lead nowhere. He paused, watching her process this. You look surprised. Should I be running? The words came out before she could stop them. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face. If you wanted to run, you would have done it already. Instead, you're drinking my whiskey and trying to figure out if I'm going to have you killed. Am I? Her heart was pounding, but she met his eyes. No, he set his glass down. I'm going to offer you a job. Taran laughed. She couldn't help it. The absurdity of the entire morning crashed over her like a wave. You're offering me a job after telling me you run a money laundering operation. I'm offering you Derek's position, Senior Vice President of Operations, triple your current salary, full benefits. And most importantly, the authority to actually enforce the compliance standards this company is supposed to maintain. Why would you want that? Because I need someone who can't be bought. Igor stood, moving to the window. Against the backdrop of Manhattan, he looked like a king surveying his territory. Chen wasn't the only problem. This entire office is infected with people who think they're smarter than they are. People who take shortcuts. People who will eventually bring attention I don't want. So you want me to clean it up. I want you to make it legitimate, or as legitimate as it can be. He turned back to her. I'm not a good man, Taran, I won't pretend to be, but I'm a practical one. This company makes me a lot of money. It also gives me a foothold in legitimate business circles that I need. If it collapses because of incompetent criminals, that doesn't serve me. Taran said. And if I say no, then you walk out of here with a generous severance package and an NDA that you will absolutely sign. His voice hardened slightly. But you won't get another opportunity like this. You're 32 years old, working 60-hour weeks for a man who was ready to destroy your career to save his own skin. You're brilliant at your job, but you're too ethical for your own good in this industry. Most places will see that as a liability. He was right. She hated. I need to think about it. You have until Monday. Igor moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, the subway incident this morning, it wasn't an accident. Taran's blood went cold. What? Chen knew you were close to uncovering the full extent of his operation. He arranged for a delay. He wanted you late so he could fire you for cause, eliminate your credibility before you could do more damage. Igor's expression was unreadable. He underestimated. After she left, riding the elevator down in a daze, clutching a business card with a private number written in bold black ink on the back, Taran couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just been split into before and after. Before she met Igor Melnikov, and after. She spent the weekend researching him. There wasn't much. Meridian Capital was privately held. Igor's name appeared on a few business registrations, some property records, nothing else. No social media. No photographs except one grainy image from a charity gala 3 years ago where he stood in the background, almost out of frame. Ghost, she thought. He lived like a ghost. Monday morning she called the number. He answered on the first ring. Yes or no? Yes, Taran said, but I have conditions. Of course you do. She could hear the smile in his voice. My office, 1 hour. The next 3 months were the most intense of Taran's life. Igor gave her complete authority to audit every department, every account, every employee. What she found was worse than she'd imagined. Chen had been the tip of the iceberg. There were shell companies within shell companies, fabricated clients, phantom employees collecting paychecks. She worked 18-hour days, often until the office was empty except for her and the night cleaning crew. And Igor. He was always there, usually in his office with the door open, always working. Sometimes he'd appear at her desk near midnight with coffee, the good kind from the Italian place 3 blocks over that closed at 10 but apparently stayed open for him. You should go home, he'd say. So should you, she'd reply. They fell into a rhythm, working in comfortable silence, occasionally bouncing ideas off each other, slowly building something that felt almost like trust. Taran learned things about him in fragments. He took his coffee black, no sugar. He was left-handed. He'd grown up in Moscow but had been in New York for 15 years. He read constantly, history mostly, biographies of men who'd built and lost empires. He had a scar on his right hand that he absently traced when he was thinking. He never talked about his family, or friends, or anything personal, really. But he listened when she talked. Really listened. Not the performative listening most men did, waiting for their turn to speak. Igor absorbed everything she said, filing it away, remembering details she'd mentioned in passing weeks later. It was dangerous, this growing comfort between them. Taran felt it most acutely on a Thursday night in late August when a summer storm knocked out power to half the building. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a dim red glow. She was alone in the conference room, surrounded by files, when Igor appeared in the doorway. Generators down on floors 12 through 20, he said. We need to evacuate. I'm almost done. Now, Taran. The use of her first name, without the formality of Miss Harper, sent a small shiver through her. She started gathering files, but he crossed the room in 3 strides and took them from her hands. Leave them. They'll be here tomorrow. His hands brushed hers as he took the folders, and the contact sent electricity up her arm that had nothing to do with this. In the red emergency lighting, his face was all shadows and sharp angles. He was standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Taran, his voice had dropped lower. We need to go. But neither of them moved. The moment stretched, pulling tight like a wire about to snap. His eyes dropped to her mouth, and Taran's breath caught. She knew she should step back, should laugh this off, should do anything but stand here wanting something she absolutely could not. A crack of thunder broke the spell. Igor stepped back first, his expression closing off. My car is downstairs. They didn't speak in the elevator, didn't speak as his driver, a silent man named Alexei, navigated through flooding streets. Igor had offered to drop her at her apartment in Brooklyn, but when they arrived, the entire block was dark. Power's out here too, Alexei said. Igor was already pulling out his phone. Change of plans. The penthouse. Taran started to protest, but he cut her off. You can't stay in a building with no power. The penthouse has a backup generator. You'll take the guest room. In the morning, when the power's restored, Alexei will take you home. It wasn't a request. The penthouse was in Tribeca, a converted loft that was somehow both austere and comfortable. Exposed brick, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes in Russian and English. It looked lived in, which surprised her. She'd half expected something sterile, impersonal. Igor showed her to the guest room, provided fresh towels, and then disappeared into his own space, giving her privacy. Taran showered, changed into the t-shirt and sweatpants he'd left for her, both too big but soft and clean. When she emerged, she found him in the kitchen, cooking. You cook! She couldn't hide her surprise. You sound shocked. He was making something that smelled amazing, onions and garlic and spices. I guess I assumed you had people for that. I do, but I don't like people in my space. He glanced at her, and something in his expression shifted. Usually. They ate at the kitchen island, some kind of Russian stew that was rich and hearty and perfect for the storm raging outside. Igor poured wine, good wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and they talked about everything except work. He told her about Moscow, about growing up in a city that was beautiful and brutal in equal measure, about his grandmother who'd raised him after his parents died, about learning to survive in a world where trust was currency and weakness was death. Taran told him about growing up in Atlanta, about her mother who'd worked 3 jobs to put her through college, about moving to New York with nothing but ambition and student loans. You miss her, Igor said. It was. Died 2 years ago. Heart attack. Taran traced the rim of her wine glass. She never got to see me succeed, never got to stop worrying about money. She saw you succeed. Igor's voice was gentle. You survived, you thrived, you maintained your integrity in an industry designed to strip it away. That's success. Taran looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd inserted himself into her life and turned everything upside down, and felt something crack open in her chest. Who are you? She whispered. Igor held her gaze. I'm someone who recognizes a kindred spirit when I see one. We're nothing alike. Aren't we? He leaned forward slightly. We're both orphans, both alone, both trying to build something that matters in a world that doesn't care if we succeed or fail. You're a criminal, and you're working for me. His smile was sad. Which makes you complicit. I'm trying to make the company legitimate. You're trying to salvage your own conscience while taking my money. He said it without judgment, just stating fact. I don't blame you. We all make compromises to survive. Taran should have been offended, should have walked out, should have done a lot of things. Instead, she stayed where she was, drawn into the gravity of this man who saw through all her justifications and still looked at her like she mattered. What do you want from me, Igor? I don't know yet. His honesty was more frightening than any lie. But I'll tell you when I figure it out. She went to bed that night in his guest room, listening to the storm and thinking about all the ways this could end badly. But when she finally fell asleep, she felt safer than she had in years. In the morning, the power was back on. Alexei drove her home without comment. She changed, went to work, and tried to pretend the night before hadn't happened. But things had shifted. Igor was more careful now, maintaining distance. Their late-night coffee runs stopped. He communicated through email instead of stopping by her office. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like loss. 2 weeks later, everything changed again. Taran was leaving work at 7 p.m., earlier than usual, when a man approached her in the parking garage. He was ordinary-looking, forgettable, the kind of person you wouldn't notice in a crowd. Miss Harper. He knew her name. I need you to come with me. Every instinct she had screamed danger. Taran started to run, but he grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. Don't scream, don't fight, get in the car or I'll hurt you. A black sedan pulled up. Another man got out, this one larger. Taran's mind raced. She was about to be kidnapped in broad daylight in a secure parking garage, and there was no one around to help. Then the elevator doors opened and Igor stepped out. Everything happened. The man holding her released her immediately, hands up. The driver got back in the car. Igor walked toward them with the kind of calm that was more terrifying than rage. Mikhail. Igor's voice was conversational. I thought I made it clear that she's off limits. We just want to talk, the man said. Mikhail, she has access to information we need. She doesn't know anything. Orlov doesn't believe that. The name hung in the air like a threat. Igor's expression didn't change, but Taran saw his hand move almost imperceptibly toward his jacket. Tell Orlov that if he touches her, I'll consider it a declaration of war. Mikhail smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're starting a war over an accountant. I'm ending one before it begins. Igor's tone left no room for argument. Leave, now. They left. Igor turned to her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked shaken. Are you hurt? She was trembling, adrenaline crashing through her system. My car, now. This time, she didn't argue. Alexei drove them not to the penthouse, but to a brownstone in the West Village. Igor led her inside, through a security system that looked military-grade, into a living room that was clearly a safe house. What just happened? Taran's voice came out steadier than she felt. Victor Orlov is a business associate, or was. Igor poured vodka this time, not whiskey, and we had a disagreement about territorial boundaries. He's been looking for leverage. And I'm leverage. No. Igor's voice turned hard. You're untouchable. I've made that very clear. This was him testing boundaries. It won't happen again. You can't guarantee that. I absolutely can. He met her eyes. But it means you can't be alone anymore, not until this is resolved. What does that mean? It means you stay here or at the penthouse. Alexei or one of my other men will be with you whenever you go out. It means your life becomes significantly more complicated. Taran set down her glass. This is insane. I should go to the police. And tell them what? That you were approached by men who didn't actually hurt you. That you work for a company that launders money for the Russian mafia. Igor's expression was bleak. The police can't protect you from this, Taran. I can. Why? The question tore out of her. Why do you care? Igor looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the room and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses she could feel against her skin. Because you make me want to be better than I am, he said quietly. Because when you walk into a room, I forget about empire and territory and all the things I've done to survive, because you look at me like I'm a person instead of a weapon. Igor, he kissed her. It was nothing like she'd imagined. Not rough or demanding, but soft, almost questioning, like he was giving her every opportunity to pull away. Tarin's hands came up to grip his wrists, but she didn't push him away. Instead, she pulled him closer, kissing him back with 3 months of repressed want. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Igor rested his forehead against hers. "This is a bad idea," he said. "The worst," Tarin agreed. "I can't offer you a normal life." "I know. I know that too." She pulled back enough to look at him. "But you're my bad man." Something in his expression cracked open, and Tarin saw the loneliness he'd been hiding, the isolation, the weight of being someone everyone feared but no one knew. "Stay tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we'll figure out how to keep you safe, but tonight just stay." She stayed. They didn't sleep together, not in that way. Igor gave her the bedroom and took the couch despite her protests. But around 3 a.m., when Tarin couldn't sleep, she found him still awake, reading in the living room. She sat next to him, and he pulled her against his side like it was the most natural thing in the world. They stayed like that until dawn, not talking, just existing together in the quiet. In the morning, everything was different and nothing was different. Igor assigned her a protection detail. Not intrusive, but present. A man named Dmitri who looked like he could bench press a car and had the personality of a particularly stoic rock. He drove her to work, waited in the lobby, drove her home. Or rather, to the penthouse, because the safe house had been temporary. "You're moving in," Igor had said, brooking no argument. "The penthouse has better security." So Tarin found herself living with her boss, the man she was falling for despite every reasonable objection her brain could manufacture. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt inevitable. They developed new routines. Morning coffee in the kitchen, Igor reading the news in Russian while she scrolled through emails. Dinners he cooked or that Alexei picked up from restaurants whose names Tarin couldn't pronounce. Evenings working in comfortable silence, occasionally discussing business but more often talking about nothing important at all. Igor was different in his own space, less guarded. He smiled more real smiles that transformed his face. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. He was unexpectedly gentle, fixing her coffee the way she liked it without being asked, making sure she ate when she was too focused on work to remember. But the danger was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Orlov was making moves, small things at first. A shipment that went missing, an account that was frozen. Messages delivered through intermediaries that became increasingly less subtle. Igor handled it all with the same cold efficiency, but Tarin could see the stress building. He slept less, worked more, made phone calls in Russian that always ended with someone sounding very afraid. "Talk to me," Tarin said one night, finding him on the penthouse terrace at 2 a.m. smoking a cigarette. She didn't know he smoked. "There's nothing to talk about." "Bullshit." She took the cigarette from his hand and stubbed it out. "You're carrying all of this alone, let me help." "You can't help with this." But his voice was tired, not angry. "Then let me be here while you carry it." Tarin moved to stand in front of him. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Igor. That's what this is, isn't it? Two people deciding not to be alone." He pulled her close, burying his face in her neck. She felt him breathe her in, and something in her chest ached at the vulnerability in the gesture. "I can't lose you," he said against her skin. "You won't. You don't know what he's capable of. Then tell me." So he did. Igor told her about the structure of the organization, about territories and tribute, about the delicate balance of power that kept the peace, about Orlov's ambition and ruthlessness, about the bodies that disappeared when people crossed him. "He wants what I have," Igor said. "The legitimate fronts, the political connections, the respect. He thinks taking you will force me to make concessions." "Will it?" Igor's smile was cold. "It will force me to end him." The matter-of-fact way he said it should have frightened her. Instead, Tarin felt a dark sort of satisfaction. This man would burn the world for her. It was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. "What's the plan? You trust me to have one?" "Yes." Igor looked at her for a long moment. "I'm going to offer him a trade, territory for peace. He'll agree because he's greedy and short-sighted. And then when his guard is down, I'm going to make sure he can never threaten you again." "That sounds like you're going to kill him." "I'm going to ensure he's no longer a problem." Igor cupped her face. "Don't ask me for details you don't want to know." Tarin kissed him instead of asking more questions. Some things were... The meeting was set for a Friday night at a restaurant in Brighton Beach, Russian territory. Igor insisted Tarin stay at the penthouse with Dmitri and 2 other guards. She hated it, hated feeling helpless, but she understood. Her presence would only be a distraction. She spent the evening pacing, watching the clock, imagining worst-case scenarios. When her phone rang at 11 p.m. with an unknown number, her heart stopped. "Hello, Miss Harper." The voice was unfamiliar. "If you want to see him alive, you'll come alone to the address I'm about to send you. No police, no guards, just you." The line went dead. Taran stared at her phone, ice flooding her veins. Dmitri was in the living room. If she told him, he'd never let her go. But if she didn't go, the text came through, an address in red hook. She had 45 minutes. Taran made a choice. She went to the bedroom, found the gun Igor kept in his nightstand. She'd never fired a weapon in her life, but she checked the safety like she'd seen in movies, tucked it in her bag, and climbed out the window onto the fire escape. The cab ride felt eternal. Red Hook at night was all shadows and industrial decay. The address was a warehouse, of course, because where else would this happen? Taran got out of the cab 3 blocks away and walked. Every horror movie she'd ever seen played through her mind. This was stupid, suicidal, exactly what they wanted. But if there was even a chance Igor was alive and needed her, she had to try. The warehouse door was unlocked. Inside was empty except for a single light hanging from the ceiling, illuminating a chair. Igor was tied to it, blood on his face, but alive, conscious. When he saw her, his expression went from shock to fury to despair in the space of a heartbeat. "Taran, no, run!" But it was too late. Men emerged from the shadows, 5 of them. Orlov stood in the center, a handsome man in his 50s with silver hair and eyes like a shark. "Miss Harper, how heroic." His English was perfect. "And stupid, Igor, you've chosen poorly. This one has more courage than sense." "Let her go." Igor's voice was raw. "This is between us." "Is it?" Orlov circled Taran slowly. "I was going to kill her to make a point, but looking at your face, I think keeping her alive will hurt you more. I think I'll keep her. Use her. Teach you what happens when you disrespect me." Taran's hand closed around the gun in her bag. "The thing is," she said, surprised at how steady her voice was, "I didn't come here to be saved." She pulled the gun and fired. The shot went wide, missing Orlov but sending everyone scrambling. In the chaos, she ran to Igor, trying to untie him with shaking hands. "The knife," he said. "My boot." She found it, cut him free. Igor took the gun from her hands and fired twice, dropping 2 of Orlov's men. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire, shouting in Russian. Igor grabbed her hand and they ran, weaving through the warehouse. More men appeared, but these ones were Igor's. Alexei. Others she recognized from the office. The fight was brutal and quick. When it was over, Orlov was on his knees, Alexei's gun pressed to his head. Igor walked up to him slowly. Taran had never seen his expression so cold. "Threatened her," Igor said quietly. "That's a mistake you don't get to walk away from." "You'll start a war," Orlov spat. "No, I'll end one." Igor looked at Alexei. "Make it clean, make it look like an accident, and make absolutely certain everyone knows why this happened." He turned away before Alexei pulled the trigger, pulling Taran with him. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. Sirens wailed in the distance. Igor's hands were shaking as he cupped her face. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "I'm fine. Igor, you're bleeding. I don't care." He kissed her hard, desperately, like he was making sure she was real. "You could have died. You should have stayed at the penthouse. They had you. So you came alone with a gun you don't know how to use to save me." He sounded torn between awe and fury. "Do you have any idea how terrifying you are? I learned from the best." Despite everything, he laughed. The sound was broken, and they went back to the penthouse in silence. Igor's men cleaned up the warehouse. The story that would circulate was that Orlov had been killed in a dispute with the Italians. Tragic, unfortunate, not Igor's problem. In the bathroom, Taran cleaned Igor's wounds, split lip, bruised ribs, nothing that wouldn't heal, but seeing him hurt made rage simmer in her chest. "I should have shot him myself," she said. Igor caught her hand. "No, you shouldn't carry that. Carry enough darkness for both of us. Maybe I don't want you to carry it alone." He pulled her down to sit on his lap, careful of his injuries. "You came for me, no one's ever done that before. Get used to it." Taran traced the scar on his eyebrow gently. "You're stuck with me now. Is that what you want, to be stuck with a criminal, living in shadows, always looking over your shoulder? I want you, everything else we'll figure out." Igor kissed her softly. "I probably shouldn't, it makes me weak, but I do." "It doesn't make you weak." Taran held his face between her hands. "It makes you human, and I love you too." They made love that night for the first time, gentle and slow, mapping each other's scars and stories. Igor worshipped her like she was something precious, something worth protecting, and Taran held him like she'd never let go. In the aftermath, lying in his arms while the city glittered below them, Taran thought about the trajectory of her life. How one subway delay had led to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Igor's voice rumbled against her ear. "That I'm glad I was late that day." She felt him smile against her hair. "Me too." The next 6 months were a study in contradiction. By day, Taran ran Meridian Capital with ruthless efficiency, cleaning out the last of the corruption, building something actually legitimate. By night, she was the woman Igor Melnikov loved, learning to navigate a world of shadows and secrets. She met his associates, the men who ran pieces of his empire. They were wary of her at first, this outsider who'd somehow become essential. But Taran had learned from Igor. She carried herself with quiet authority, never showing fear. Eventually, they accepted her. Some even respected her. She learned to shoot properly. Dmitri taught her patient and thorough. She learned to notice details, to read people, to trust her instincts about danger. She also learned about Igor's world, the legitimate businesses that funded schools and community centers in Russian neighborhoods, the protection he offered to people who had nowhere else to turn, the strict code he lived by: no drugs, no human trafficking. No. He wasn't a good man, but he wasn't a monster either. He was complicated like everyone else, just with higher stakes. They talked about the future sometimes, late at night when the walls came down. "I want out eventually," Igor admitted. "Not tomorrow, not next year, but eventually. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder." "What would you do?" "I don't know, something quiet. Maybe we could leave the city, find somewhere peaceful." "You'd be bored in a week." "Maybe." "But I'd be bored with you. That sounds better than constantly fighting without you." Taran didn't know if that future was possible. Igor's world didn't let people leave easily, but she liked imagining it. A life where the biggest concern was what to have for dinner, not who was trying to kill them. The board meeting where Taran officially became CEO of Meridian Capital was a turning point. Igor had orchestrated it carefully, building support, making it clear this was... When the vote passed unanimously, he stood and applauded with everyone else, his expression proud. Afterward, alone in his office, he pulled her into his arms. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying, exhilarating." Taran looked up at him. "Thank you for believing in me. I didn't do anything, you earned this." "We both know that's not entirely true," Igor shrugged. "I opened the door, you walked through it and set the place on fire, that's all you." The irony wasn't lost on... She'd started that morning a year ago thinking she was about to lose everything. Instead, she'd gained more than she'd ever imagined. But the universe has a way of balancing scales. The FBI came on a Tuesday morning. Not for Igor, though he'd been expecting that knock eventually. For Taran. They had questions about Meridian Capital, about the restructuring, about certain financial irregularities that had been reported. Taran sat in an interrogation room for 6 hours, answering every question truthfully. Yes, she discovered evidence of money laundering. Yes, she'd reported it. Yes, she'd worked to eliminate those practices. No, she had not personally participated in any illegal activity. The lead agent, a woman named Sarah Chen, looked at her with something almost like sympathy. "Miss Harper, you're not under investigation, but the company is, and we both know who really owns it." Igor Melnikov owns a lot of legitimate businesses. He also owns a lot of illegitimate ones. Agent Chen leaned forward. "We're building a case. It's going to take time, but eventually we'll have enough. When that happens, everyone close to him goes down too. You seem like a smart woman, too smart to throw your life away for a man like that." Taran met her eyes. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm not interested in making a deal." "Not even him." Agent Chen sat back, studying her. "He must be really something." "He is." They let her go with a warning to stay available for further questions. Taran went straight to the penthouse. Igor was waiting, tension visible in every line of his body. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that I cleaned up the company, that I don't know anything about your other businesses, that I'm not making a deal." Taran set her bag down. "They're building a case against you." "I know. And you didn't tell me. What would you have done? Left?" His voice was harsh. "I'm not ready to let you go. That's not your choice to make." Taran was angry now. "You should have told me, given me the option." "You're right." Igor ran his hands through his hair. "You're absolutely right, I'm sorry." The apology took the wind out of her anger. Igor didn't apologize often. When he did, it meant something. "What are we going to do?" "I'm going to insulate you. Transfer ownership of Meridian to a trust. Create distance on paper. If they come for me, you'll be clean." "I don't want to be clean if it means losing you." "Taran, no." She crossed to him, took his hands. "We're in this together, that's what you told me, that's what this is." Igor looked at her like she was breaking his heart and healing it at the same time. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." They spent the next several months preparing. Igor's lawyers, the expensive kind who knew how to make problems disappear, built firewalls, trusts and shell companies and paper trails that led nowhere. Meridian Capital became completely legitimate, at least on the surface, with Taran as the sole owner. Igor pulled back from his other operations, delegating more, attending fewer meetings. He was systematically dismantling his empire piece by piece, preparing for either prison or freedom. "If they arrest me," he said one night, "there's money, accounts in your name, more than you'll ever need. Promise me you'll take it and disappear." "I'm not making that promise." "Taran, no, if they arrest you, I'll wait however long it takes." Igor kissed her forehead. "I love you, but you're incredibly stubborn." "I learned from the best." The arrest didn't come. Instead, something else happened. A wire transfer from one of Igor's old accounts triggered an investigation. Not FBI this time, but Interpol. Apparently, one of Igor's former associates had been arrested in Germany and was trading information for immunity. Igor got the call on a Thursday evening. He listened for a long time, his expression growing darker. "How long do I have?" he asked finally, then understood. He ended the call and looked at Taran. "I need to go to Moscow. There are things I need to handle before the arrest warrants are issued." "I'm coming." "Igor, this isn't negotiable." His voice was firm. "Russia is different. I can protect you here. There you'd be vulnerable. I need to know you're safe. How long will you be gone?" "I don't know, a month, maybe longer." He pulled her close. "Maybe forever if things go wrong." "They won't." "You don't know that." But Taran refused to consider the alternative. Igor would handle whatever needed handling and come back to her. He always did. The night before he left, they talked about everything and nothing, made love like they were trying to memorize each other, held each other as if touch could build a bridge across distance. "I'll call when I can," Igor said at the airport. "Private terminal, of course. But if you don't hear from me, I'll hear from you." He kissed her one last time, hard and desperate. Then he was gone. The first week was bearable. Igor called twice, brief conversations that told her nothing except that he was alive. Second week, the calls stopped. Taran tried not to panic, told herself he was busy, that he was being careful, that silence meant safety. By the third week, she was climbing the walls. Alexei was the one who finally told her. Igor had been arrested, not in Moscow, but in Berlin, where Interpol had been waiting. He was being held pending extradition to the U.S. "When?" "4 days ago." "And you're just telling me now?" Alexei looked uncomfortable. "He didn't want you to worry or do anything stupid." "Too late for that." Taran was already pulling out her phone. "I need a lawyer, the best one we have." "Miss Taran, just don't." She met his eyes. "He came for me when I needed him. I'm returning the favor." The legal battle was brutal. Igor was facing charges in 3 countries: money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy. The evidence was substantial, built over years of surveillance. But Taran had connections Igor had built. And most importantly, she had detailed records of Meridian Capital's transformation from criminal enterprise to legitimate business. She flew to Berlin with Igor's lead attorney, a woman named Katerina who looked like a model but had the ruthlessness of a shark. They fought for access, for bail, for anything. When Taran finally saw Igor through reinforced glass, he looked thinner, harder, but alive. His expression when he saw her was pure. "You shouldn't have come. Really, that's what you're leading with." Taran pressed her hand to the glass. "How are you?" "I've been better. They're moving me to the U.S. next week, federal custody." He mirrored her gesture, palm to palm with only glass between them. "Taran, you need to walk away. This is going to get ugly." "I don't care." "I care. I don't want you dragged through this." "Too bad. You don't get to decide that." She blinked back tears. "We're going to fight this. Katerina says we have a chance if we can prove you've divested from criminal activities. I've been a criminal for 20 years. There's no walking that back. Then we'll show rehabilitation, change, the work you've done in the community, the legitimate businesses you've built." Taran was grasping at straws, but she refused to give up. "You're not going to prison. I won't let that happen." Igor's smile was sad. "My brave Taran, always fighting." "Damn right." The trial took 8. Taran attended every day, sitting in the gallery, watching Igor in his tailored suit looking like a stranger. The prosecution painted him as a monster. Money laundering for terrorist organizations, human trafficking, murder, most of it was lies. Some of it was exaggeration, some of it was true. Katerina was brilliant, tearing apart witnesses, casting doubt on evidence. But the weight of the charges was overwhelming. Taran took the stand as a character witness. She told that Igor had given her a chance when no one else would. That he'd supported her transformation of Meridian Capital, that he was a man trying to build something better. The prosecution made her look naive. A woman blinded by love, unable to see the monster she shared a bed with. It hurt. But Tarin held her head high and refused to break. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. Guilty on 7 counts. Not guilty on the worst ones, the trafficking and murder charges. But enough to put him away for 20 years. Tarin sat frozen as they led him away. Igor looked back once, found her in the crowd, and mouthed, "I love you." Then he was gone. The next month was the worst of Tarin's life. Igor was transferred to a federal facility upstate. She visited every week, sat across from him in a room full of other prisoners and their loved ones, and pretended her heart wasn't shattering. "You should move on," Igor said during the 3rd visit. "Someone who can give you a normal life." "Shut up," he blinked, surprised. "Tarin, I said shut up. I'm not leaving. I'm not moving on. I'm going to visit you every week, and I'm going to keep fighting, and when you get out, because you will get out, I'm going to be there." She leaned forward. "You don't get to decide I'm better off without you. I decide that, and I've decided I'm not." Igor's composure cracked. 20 years is a long time. Then we have 20 years. "But Katerina is working on appeals. Good behavior, you could be out in 12. I can wait 12 years. That's your entire 30s. Yep, you'll hate me eventually. Probably sometimes. I'll also love you always." Tarin reached across the table, taking his hand despite the guard's warning look. "You taught me to fight for what I want you, so I'm fighting." Igor brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. "You're extraordinary." "I know." The appeals process was slow and frustrating, but there were small victories. The sentence was reduced to 15 years. With good behavior, Igor could be out in 9. 9 years. Tarin was 33. She'd be 42 when he was released. She threw herself into work. Meridian Capital thrived under her leadership. She expanded into new markets, hired aggressively, built something her mother would have been proud of. She also started a foundation. Scholarships for kids from rough neighborhoods, job training programs, re-entry services for people leaving prison. Igor called it her penance. Tarin called it paying it forward. They fell into a routine. Weekly visits, daily letters, occasional phone calls that were too short and too monitored. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was what they had. Year 2, Igor was moved to a minimum security facility. Better conditions, more privileges. He started teaching other inmates English, helping them prepare for life after release. Year 3, Katerina found new evidence. A witness who'd lied under oath. It wasn't enough to overturn the conviction, but it was enough to petition for a reduced sentence. Year 4, the petition was granted. 15 years became 12. With good behavior, Igor could be out in 7. Tarin allowed herself to hope. Year 5, she bought a house. Not in the city, but upstate, near the facility. A small farmhouse with land and an apple orchard. She fixed it up slowly, imagining the life they'd build there. Year 6, Igor was diagnosed with high blood pressure, the stress of confinement taking its toll. Tarin researched nutrition, sent him books on meditation, nagged him about taking his medication during every visit. Year 7, the parole hearing. Igor had been a model prisoner, helped other inmates, caused no problems. Tarin testified, as did several of his former students who'd successfully re-entered society. The parole board was skeptical. A man with Igor's history didn't just reform, but the evidence was undeniable. After 8 hours of deliberation, they granted early release. Igor walked out of prison on a Tuesday morning in March. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were still the same. When he saw Tarin waiting by her car, his entire face transformed. She ran. He caught her, lifting her off her feet, holding her like he'd never let go. 7 years, he said against her hair. Worth every second, she replied. They drove to the farmhouse. Igor walked through it slowly, touching the furniture she'd chosen, looking at the photos she'd hung, the life she'd built in anticipation of this moment. "You did all this for us," he said. "Of course I did." That night, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the orchard. Igor held her hand, tracing patterns on her palm. "I'm not the same man I was," he said quietly. "Good, neither am I. I don't know how to live a quiet life. Then we'll figure it out together." Tarin leaned against him. "You once told me you wanted peace. Here it is." Igor was quiet for a long time. Then, "I love you, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "I know, I love you too." They sat there until the stars came out, 2 people who'd fought their way through fire to find something worth keeping. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be challenges ahead. Igor had to check in with his parole officer weekly, find legitimate work, avoid his old associates, rebuild a life from nothing. But Tarin had waited 7 years. She could wait a little longer for normal. And slowly, day by day, they built something that felt like home. Igor worked with her at Meridian Capital, using his knowledge of international business for legitimate ventures. They had dinner together every night, took walks in the orchard, talked about everything and nothing. 6 months after his release, Igor asked her to marry him. Nothing fancy, just a simple question on the porch at sunset. Yes, Tarin said, because there had never been any other answer. They married that fall, small ceremony, just Alexei and a few other close friends. Tarin wore a simple dress. Igor wore a suit that wasn't $1,000 Italian but was honest. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other through whatever came next, Tarin thought about the subway delay that had started everything. About being late and almost being fired and meeting a dangerous man who'd seen something in her worth saving. "What are you thinking?" Igor asked, because he could always tell. "That I'd do it all again," she said. "Even the 7 years. Even that because it brought us here." Igor kissed her, and it tasted like promises and second chances and hard-won peace. They had a life now, not the one either of them had imagined, but the one they'd built together from wreckage and hope, and that was more than enough. "Hey, loves. Thank you for staying with me through Tarin and Igor's entire journey. I know it was long, I know it was intense, and I know it probably hurt your heart in places. It hurt mine writing it. This story is special to me because it's about second chances, about choosing love even when it's complicated, even when it's scary, even when the whole world says it's wrong. Tarin could have walked away 100 times. Igor could have pushed her away to keep her safe, but they chose each other, again and again, even when it cost them everything. I wanted to write a mafia romance that felt real. Not glamorized, not sanitized, but honest about the costs and the consequences. Love doesn't fix everything. Igor still went to prison. Tarin still lost 7 years, but they endured, and that's its own kind of beautiful. If you made it all the way here, please leave a comment. Tell me what you felt. Tell me if you would have waited. Tell me if you think they'll make it. I want to know what this story meant to you, because these characters have become so real to me, and I think they might be real to you too now. Thank you for listening to their story. Thank you for believing in love that fights, that waits, that refuses to give up. Until next time, my loves, stay strong, stay brave, and never apologize for loving hard.